Good evening, everyone. My screen is sharing and my sound is working, hopefully. Yeah, yeah, I'm getting a confident nod from outside, so I'm assuming it is. Thanks very much for joining me this evening. My name is John Allen. I'm over the grant compliance side of things in Ashgrove. I have Connor Murphy outside the door who's telling me the sound is definitely working now. It's good. Um, but Connor is there to answer any questions. There's a Q&A box in the bottom of the screen that you can submit your questions to. If there's any BER assessors or architects or anything like that who are looking for CPD points, put it in there and we'll get them out to you as soon as we can. But other than that, thanks very much for joining us. What we'll be going through today, it's the vacant and derelict is kind of the primary talking point for today. And we'll be looking at the grant amounts, the eligibility criteria, the form. We'll be going through the form step by step and how to fill that out. And we'll be looking at a case study. On top of that, as well as a vacant and derelict grant, which is up to 70,000, you can claim the SEAI grants as well, which is up to 38,000 now with the new grant announcement. So there's different grants available. The SEAI grants are based around upgrading the energy aspects of your home. So making sure that you're reducing carbon. That's what SEAI care about. The vacant and derelict, apologies, the vacant and derelict grants are primarily concerned with bringing houses back into circulation. So they want to, I suppose, help solve the housing crisis, whereas the SEAI grant want to reduce the carbon associated with houses. So you can claim the SEAI grants for houses that are claiming the vacant and derelict grant, but you can also claim the SEAI grants separately to the vacant and derelict grant. We'll be going through the eligibility criteria for the SEAI grants, the process for that, and how it aligns with the vacant and derelict, and some case studies as well. So I'm going to do a small 2 slides very quickly about Ashgrove, just to give you a bit of a background of where we're coming from. We've been in operation since 2001. We've been in energy and home energy, domestic energy, heat pumps, solar. It would have been solar thermal at the time. Now, obviously, solar PV is a lot more popular, but we've been there since 2001. We're grant specialists. That's our main focus is grant eligibility. How can we use the grants as best as possible in order to claim those grants? Most of them are through the SEAI. Vacant and derelict aren't, obviously, but the SEAI, the one-stop shop, the CEG and the BEH, 3 different grant types that you can go down. We'll go through them briefly later on to see the differences between them. We have 87 people in our office, growing day by day. Sorry, is there a bit of an echo? Just check the sound. And is there a bit of an echo? No? Sorry, Thelma. I'm being told outside that there's no echo, so hopefully maybe that's on your side. Sorry, hopefully that stops. Might be worthwhile maybe logging out and logging back in again to see if it resolves itself. So on top of the 87 people in our office, we also have installation crews out on the road. Main reason the 87 people, we're there to try and offer the best advice we can to people to get back in contact with people. Obviously, the number of inquiries has hugely increased since the SEAI grant announcement on the 27th. We also have a professional network, architects, BER assessors, builders, plumbers, installation contractors throughout the country. There are areas where we're maybe lighter than we'd like to be. So if you are one of those, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to chat to you to discuss if there's any place or we can align with each other. We do a lot of these free information events, so seminars. The next one is in Mullingar on the 16th of March, so the day before Paddy's Day. It's on 6:30 in the evening on a Monday evening. Possible to pick the right day for everyone, but hopefully you can get there. You can register on the website, ashgrove.ie, if you wish to attend that. It is free to go to, but places are numbered, so if you are going, please register. If you're not going, please let us know and we can open up space for other people. We do have an app as well, whatgrant.ie, that has short videos explaining the different grant amounts. You'll have seen it at the start. It's currently being updated to reflect the new grants, so hopefully that's coming soon. But the principle of the grant is still the same within it. And we do a lot of these webinars as well. We're doing probably definitely over 100 of them a year. They're typically Tuesday evening, and then there's typically a specialist one on a Friday lunchtime as well, talking about specific topics, be it heat pump common mistakes or solar commercial PV or whatever. And they're all free to join. So the Vacant and Derelict grants, we did hear probably a lot of bad press about it, particularly in around Q1, Q2, Q3, 23, where the evidence was indicating, I suppose, that nobody was drawing down any money or nobody was getting any benefit from it. This is always the case with grants like this. There is a bedding in time where, number one, the industry gets familiar with it, but also the projects that I've started and applied for it don't get completed for 12, 13 or 14 or 15 months. So there's a very obvious reason why maybe the numbers are lower then. But you can see now, Q4 2025, there was over 4,500 people who had been paid out money from the Vacant and Derelict grant. So there is money being paid out. It is working for people. Of course, we all hear the horror stories of people who haven't been paid out or it's been a disaster. That may happen in isolated scenarios, but in the main, there's 4,514 people who have money in their bank account from this grant. So it is working. We just need to play within the rules, I suppose, understand the rules first of all, and play within them. If you, the Irishness in us is always trying to find a way to manipulate the rules and to see if we can get one over. Once you understand the principle and play within the rules, the money is there and it's available and they're happy to pay it out. And we'll be going through the principle of what they're trying to do with these grants over the course of this webinar. So there's different types of home upgrade grants available. As I said, there's a vacant house grant and the derelict house grant. The vacant is 50,000 and the derelict is an extra 20,000 euro top up on it. They're all administered by the local authority. As I said, the main purpose of those is to get houses back into circulation. So it's to help solve the housing crisis. They want an old farmhouse that's been maybe left idle there, not a lot done with it. They want the person who owns it to go, okay, thinking of doing anything with it for a while, but now that there's 70,000 euro worth of grants available, I will do something with it. So that's the purpose of the grants, is to help or incentivize you to do something with that house, or the owners to do something with that house. There's also the community energy grant, the one-stop shop, the individual upgrade grants, and SEAI pilot schemes, traditional homes, and there's 2 heat pump pilot schemes as well. They're all administered by SEAI, Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. They're there to reduce the carbon associated with your house. So the purpose of those is to get your BER from a low BER rating up to a high BER rating, or improve it. So that's what the SEAI want to see when they're giving out taxpayers' money. Both of these are taxpayers' money, so we all want it to be used we all want it to be used properly and for the correct reasons. We all know we need to decarbonize. That's what SEAI is there for. We all know we need additional houses. That's what the local authority grant is there for. So onto the vacant house grant. As I said, it's 50,000 euro is the max grant you can get for a vacant property. It has to have been built before 2008, and it has to be vacant for a minimum of 2 years. There is proof of vacancy required. That can come in the form of either low or zero ESB bills. That's the most obvious one. Obviously, if there's no electricity usage, it's fairly reasonable for the local authority to draw to the conclusion that it's been vacant. If it's been vacant, but there's a farmyard attached to it or something like that, that's where you might need to get into affidavits that need to be signed or something like that in order to satisfy the local authority that it's vacant. The rules are there that it needs to be vacant for 2 years or more. It is up to each local authority to satisfy themselves with that. So some local authorities might accept one thing, another local authority might accept something slightly different. Unfortunately, that's the nature of it. The alternative is to put very clear rules in place that are very black and white, and then people will fall out that could be legitimate. So they've left it up to the local authority to satisfy themselves that the house has been vacant for more than 2 years. You can claim this grant for a maximum of 2 properties. So one can be your principal residence, and one can be a long-term rental registered with the RTB, the Residential Tenancy Board. That's what they want the houses to be used for. Either you're coming from a house that you're living in and moving into this one, in which case, great, that's again a step towards helping the housing crisis, or you're making it available on the rental market that somebody can sign up and rent it out. They don't want you to be renting it for cash to your brother or something like that. They're happy for you to rent it to your brother, but it has to be put up on the Residential Tenancy Board as a legitimate rental property. That's the purpose of it. Again, we don't want taxpayers' money going to people who are then earning an income off it and not going through the right channels and paying tax. So it's all about the best use of taxpayers' money. Conversion of commercial properties is eligible. So you can claim this grant if you're converting a commercial property to domestic. And the local property tax has to be, you're either exempt from local property tax or it needs to be paid up to date. And all your contractors need to be tax compliant. Hopefully that goes without saying. So the derelict grant is a top up on top of that. So if the house is vacant for more than 2 years and it's built before 2008, you're eligible for up to 50,000. If it's deemed to be derelict, you're eligible for an additional 20,000 on top of that. So that brings you up to a total grant of 70,000. The wording around what qualifies as derelict is ambiguous as well, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your viewpoint. It's structurally unsound and dangerous is what they're looking for. They're looking for a report from an engineer, independent to yourself, obviously, to say that this is the case. And again, this is left up to the local authorities to determine, yes, this qualifies as derelict, or no, it doesn't. Some of us have a picture in our head of a house that has the roof falling in that needs to be derelict. Not necessarily the case. You can have a very unstructurally sound or unsound chimney breast or something like that, large cracks, damage to the roof. All that sort of stuff can qualify. Again, unfortunately, depends a little bit on your local authority, but all that can be eligible for the derelict grant. If you're in doubt, I suppose our recommendation is talk to an engineer who can do up a report to see if they're happy to write their name to say that it's structurally unsound. And if they are, what will happen is the local authority will come out, view it, and say, actually, no, this doesn't qualify as derelict, and they'll just support you for the vacant side and not the derelict side. So it's not that none of the local authorities that we've heard of or spoken to are trying to find a way to kick you out of the grant. So if you apply for the vacant and derelict because you genuinely believe that it could be qualified as derelict, the local authority come out and say, no, this isn't derelict. They're not going to kick you out and say, don't talk to us ever again. They're going to say, you're only eligible for the vacant grant, and you won't get the derelict. So you're kind of no worse off. So engaging with the vacant homes officer in your local authority is probably an important, one of the most important things you can do. Obviously, if the building or if the structure is on the local authority's derelict site register, it qualifies as derelict. You don't need an independent report in that case. You do have 13 months to complete the work. This is for vacant and derelict. They are flexible with this. In again, every local authority we've seen that you can apply for extensions there. Once you send them a picture of what it looks like at month 11, do it before the month 13 rather than after, obviously. But if you're running up against it in month 11 or month 12, you can send them in a picture and say, look, I'm not going to be finished within the 13-month window. I need an extra 4 months or 5 months or whatever it is to complete. Contractors have let us down, all that sort of stuff. They'll happily extend that in our experience. The reason that the 13 months is there is to make sure projects are progressing. What they don't want is for John to get approval for a €70,000 grant, which the local authority then has to ring fence for John. And if John doesn't do anything for 5 years, he's potentially stopping somebody else from getting approval for it because John got approval early and therefore I'll just sit on it for 5 years and sure, I might use it at the end or I might not. That's the reason for that 13-month timeline, is to make sure that it's there's not money ring fenced for somebody who is not going to use it. So if you send them pictures of the house very clearly progressing, a lot of work's done, and you just need an extra few months, in our experience, they're happy to extend that. So that's the vacant and derelict standard grants, if you like. There is obviously a lot of talk about the over the shop grants, which were announced kind of late last year, still haven't been fully released, but I suppose this is kind of the information we have to date. It's maximum grant of 140,000. It's 95,000 for the first apartment over the shop, 20,000 for the next apartment, and another 20,000 for the third apartment. And then there's 5,000 for kind of expert advice for the structure. So there's a grant there of 5,000 for that. That brings you to 95,000. So again, the purpose of this one is for the commercial premises that we have loads of them in all the towns throughout the country, where there's a shop on the ground floor and all the floors above it are empty. They want to incentivize people to move back into the urban areas. Urban living is something that's obviously very sustainable. Where all centralized services can all happen within a smaller area rather than having one-off houses out the country all over the place. So they're trying to incentivize bringing these above the shop premises back into habitable use. And there's quite generous grants to incentivize you to do that. At the moment, they're definitely available for private individuals. There is talk of them allowing micro companies apply for this. Through the standard vacant and derelict grant, it's only private individuals that can apply for it. They don't want companies going around and buying up loads of properties and doing them up and claiming the vacant and derelict grant. So it's only private individuals for the standard vacant and derelict grant. For this over the shop one, there is an acknowledgement out there that a lot of these buildings will probably be owned by the pub on the ground floor or the shop on the ground floor. And so excluding those micro companies from it will be a barrier to getting the area above the shop or the pub done. So we don't know if that's going to be fully allowed. Personally, I hope it is. I think it would be a good call. But we don't know. It's currently with the Department of Housing to decide on how they're going to administer that and what they're going to allow. On top of the vacant and derelict grants for the over the shop, you can get SEAI grants as well for apartments. So you can get, this is just an example, 12,000 for each of those for the energy upgrade works as well. So that's on top of the vacant and derelict grant. So becomes very incentivized. Just a question there on for the over the shop. The kitchen is on the ground floor of the building, and the bedrooms are above the shop, does this matter? No, Mark. Again, we don't have full details on it, but I would imagine that that doesn't matter. They will happily accept it. They call it above the shop grant. Obviously, if there's an element of the dwelling behind the shop, they're happy to. I would strongly imagine that they'll allow that. Regarding the criteria for the vacant grant, does the vacant home tax come into play in the same manner as the local property tax? Does this have to be paid on a vacant property to get the grant? Don't know if they're going to enforce that you have to have been paying the vacant home tax in order to get the grant. So if you want to send in your name there, that was sent by anonymous attendee, we can look into that and come back to you on it. I'm not certain on the response for that. Sorry. So when you do get the clawback, or sorry, when you do get the grant, they do have a clawback mechanism there. A lot of us can not like this, but again, it's to make sure the taxpayers' money is used to do as good as possible. So they do put a charge on the property. It's second to the mortgage, so it won't affect your mortgage application. The fact that you're applying for this, the mortgage still gets first dibs. It's not linked to the property value, so it doesn't matter if your property goes up or down. The council or the taxpayer still want their money back. They only want this back, by the way, if you sell or the property changes ownership. They don't want it back if you continue living in it for forever. They're happy the money has been put to good use. But if you sell it, you're now selling it with the added value that you got from the taxpayer, and so now you're essentially profiting from it. So if you sell it within 5 years, they want 100% of the money they gave you back. So if they gave you 70,000, they want the full 70,000 back. If they gave you 44,000, they want 44,000 euro back. If you sell it between 5 and 10 years, they want 75% of the value that they've given you back. And if it's over 10 years, they take the charge off the property. So they don't want any of it back. So there can be a very emotional response to this. And we've had people at an event we were at, trying to find ways of getting around this and all this sort of stuff. They're the rules. They're there to stop people buying a property, getting the benefit of the 70,000, doing it up, selling it, buying another property, doing it up, selling it. They're essentially getting the benefit of 70,000 euro of taxpayers' money for their own pocket. So they want to try and stop that as much as possible. And so the spirit of it there is there for the right reason. It won't suit us all the time and it won't suit everybody, but it has to be there to stop complete skullduggery from happening. So the steps that you need to go through in order to claim the vacant house grant. First thing is submit your application form. We'll be going through that in a while. After you submit the application form, the local authority will come out, inspect the house. There'll be one person in the local authority told us that the main thing they're looking for is that the house actually exists. They were at the time getting an awful lot of applications for houses that weren't even there. So they're there to see that the house exists, that it is derelict, and all that you put on your application form seems to ring true. After this, you get notification of approval. You can then carry out the works. Once the works are complete, or when you're nearing completion, you can submit your claim form. The local authority will come out again and inspect it to make sure that the house is now habitable. They will only give you the money once the house is habitable, because again, they want to make sure that the money has been put to good use, that the house is now available for rent or available to be used as your primary principal residence, and then you'll receive payment. So you only get the payment at the end of the project, unfortunately, but it's only after they've satisfied themselves that it's habitable, and that's through the site inspection. Habitable, again, depends on the local authority. There is some kind of vague guidelines that you have a flushing toilet, a working tap, and a working light switch, or something like that. Each local authority might have a slightly different take in it. If all those things are ticked and it's very obviously not habitable, they'll obviously say it's not habitable. So they're kind of guidelines that the houses can be used. But obviously, if you put a big push on to get a working sink there in the corner, but it's very clearly no floors down and you can't move in, they're still not going to pay out. They need the property to be habitable to make sure that the money has been put to good use. The SEAI grants, again, with all grants, you need to get approval before you start any works that you're getting grant aided for. So with any grant that you're getting from the government, they don't want you to go do the works and then apply for the grant at the end. The principle is that you get approval, get grant approval, that they will happily give you the money if you adhere by the rules. You do the work as per the rules, and then they will pay you the money at the end. So before you start works, you should get approval for any SEAI grants you're getting as well, which for, I'm going to say, all vacant and derelict houses, there's no reason why you shouldn't be getting SEAI grants as well. So this is the application form. Keep your questions coming in there. Connor is answering a lot of the specific ones away. But this is what the application form looks like. Going to go through it section by section, which unfortunately will be a bit boring for people, but it's to really take away the mystery around it as much as possible. So the first section is your info. That's your name, the house you're currently living in, and email address and phone number. Additional info is where you can put in that the house has been vacant for 2 years, but there's a farmyard attached to it with a milking parlour, so the electricity usage is high, and a bit of an explanation for why it's vacant. They don't really want your life story there, but if you can tell them some of the reasons why you might think it's eligible for the vacant property grant, even maybe if the electricity bills are high or whatever it is. The next section is the vacant property details, so the air code, how long has it been vacant for, and if it's detached, semi-detached, terrace or an apartment. You will need an air code. You can apply for that air code on air code or through air code finder anyway, but it is possible to apply for the air code. And if you're in the early stages of this, something that's worthwhile getting in motion, because it can take a bit of time. Next section is if the property is on an island. If it's not an island, obviously say no and you can move on. The local property tax and the value of the house or the property is the next section. So making sure that you're compliant with your local property tax and the value of the property. The next section, you're indicating whether you intend to use it as your principal private residence or rental property. They want you to commit to this at the start. Again, once you're adhering by the principle of the grants, in our experience, they're happy to switch this over halfway through if you want. If it was a rental property for 2 years and you're keeping it in your same name, but you've decided to move into it as your principal private residence, that's in the spirit of what they're trying to do. So they'll be okay with that from in our experience. The next section is on the local authority purchase and renovation loan. This is for first-time buyers. It's an excellent opportunity. It's essentially a bridging loan for the value of the grant that you've got grant approval for. So it means you don't have to get a mortgage to the full value of the works when they're complete. You can get it less a mortgage, less the grant amount that you've been approved for the vacant and derelict grant. And that grant then goes directly to the local authority rather than to you once it's complete. And then you're just selecting whether you're only applying for the vacant grant or whether you're applying for the vacant and derelict grant. The next page, they're just asking, have you claimed vacant and derelict grants before? If you have, you say yes and provide details of the house that you've applied for before. And If you haven't, which most people that we're coming across, this is their first time doing it, so you say no. And then the next section is SEI grants. They only want to know if you are intending on applying for SEI grants, so we would suggest selecting yes for this. This isn't a trick question. This isn't if we select yes on this, they'll kick us out. They just need to know, for reasons we'll get into later on, they don't want to grant aid you twice for the same thing. So this is just a way for them to establish if you intend to go for the SEI grants or not. This is probably the meat of the page, the document, if you like. This is the page where you put the value of the works that you're looking at doing. This is the proposed cost of works. We all know, unfortunately, we've seen room to improve. When you start doing works, they'll inevitably end up different to what you thought. Unfortunately, it's normally larger than what you thought. But so they are just looking for an estimate. If this changes during the course of the project, it's not the end of the world. There's a separate form we fill out once we're complete, but they're looking for an estimate, and what the local authority is looking for when they come out to say, okay, looking at the house, looking at the cost these guys have, that seems reasonable. It seems like they'll need to do the level of work that's here, or they're not unrealistic that they think the whole thing is going to cost them 10,000 and they're gutting the whole place and adding on a 200-meter squared extension. So it's really for the local authority to establish that, yeah, the level of works that it looks like they need to do, and from the conversations with you they're doing, aligns with what the costs are. It doesn't have to be down to the euro. It's only an estimate. The next page is a question: can you pay for the additional works not covered by the grants? Probably, I'm sure there's a kind of a legal reason, obviously, why they're asking that. You don't have to provide proof at this stage or anything like that. There are questions on smoke detectors and heat alarms, heat detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. I don't know why they're there, but if it's a very old property, it's okay to put 0 and 0 in there. And then we're into declarations that we declare all the information is correct to GDPR, and you're signing at the bottom. The last page then is just checklists. So there's 2 checklists there. One if it's a principal private residence, and the other if it's a rental property. There's a few more things you need to add if it's a rental property assigned, or if you're intending it to be a rental property, a declaration of intent to make the property available for rent, and that a tenancy will be registered with the RTB prior to grant drawdown. So you're just committing to that if you are doing rental property. So as I said, after that you're going ahead doing the works, and then when you're nearing completion, you can request a claim form from the council or from the local authority. This is from Cork County Council. This is where, unfortunately, solicitors have to get involved to put the lien or the charge on the property. Confirmation that the purchase price and all that sort of stuff. Not a whole pile of detail needed in that. This is the Excel part of the claim form then, where you're putting in the cost of the works that they are to you. So you're submitting invoices to the local authority for what you want to claim for. Obviously, they can't give you money without having proof that you've paid it out. Again, they don't want you to profit from it, so they need invoices from builders or whoever it is for the works. And then that's what you fill in column E there, highlighted in red. And then the local authority then fill out column F and G and basically clarify that this is the grant amount that you're getting. So you can see there for skirtings here, there's a maximum that you can claim for skirtings of €3,500. If your skirtings cost €7,000, you can put in the invoice for €7,000, but the max that they'll pay you out on that particular element is €3,500. And what you want is for this column essentially to add up to the maximum it can. So ideally 70,000. A couple of questions coming in. Do you have to pay out before the claim is rewarded? So yeah, you'll have to pay your contractors as normal unless you can negotiate terms and get your contractors to fund it, which would be very rare, I'd say. But yeah, you have to pay your contractors as normal and then submit your invoices to the local authority, and the local authority will pay you at the end once the house is habitable and they have evidence of what you paid. Isn't ideal. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to administer. If they pay the money up front, who's to say, thanks very much for the money, local authority, I'm gone off to Spain and I'm moving there, and now they'll never get it back off you. And we're spending more taxpayers' money trying to chase down these people who have the money. So the only real way to administer it, unfortunately, is to get the works done and then pay the grants at the end. Another question, I hadn't heard of the grant being passed on to local authorities less mortgage before. Is this available for derelict and SEAI grants combined? Can you go over briefly again? Yeah, Deirdre, it's the Local Authority Purchase and Renovation Loan Scheme. It's a full webinar in itself nearly. We probably should do one on it. Yeah, I'll Conor will type in there the Local Authority Purchase and Renovation Loan Scheme and maybe send you a link onto it. It's there for, as I said, for first-time buyers is what it's aimed for, to help you get on the property ladder. And it does take that funding, or assist with that funding element at least. So that's the claim form. So that's the end of the vacant and derelict grants. The SEAI grants are the next ones that you can claim on top of those, the vacant and derelict grants. So you can claim both SEAI and vacant and derelict grants. It's completely legitimate. There's no grey area here. They're very happy for you to do that. There's a number of grant routes you can go down: the community energy grant, or the one-stop shop grant, or the individual energy upgrades. For most of the vacant and derelict properties we're seeing, I'm going to say 99% of them, the community energy grant is really the one that's suited. So there has been a grant announcement on the 27th of January. A couple of the changes, just at a very high level, the changes. The attic insulation grant has gone up by €500. There's an additional €500 on top of this for first-time buyers, so that brings it up to 2,500 for first-time buyers, 2,000 for a detached house for non-first-time buyers. The cavity wall insulation grant on detached houses increased by €100. That's bringing it up to €1,800. And the heat pump grant came up to €12,500 at a maximum. All of these measures are getting very close to covering the full cost of the works. I say that with a massive asterisk beside it. Obviously, if you have a 300 meter squared house that you're looking at doing attic insulation, cavity wall, and putting in a heat pump in, that'll be more expensive. But for estate houses, it's getting very close to covering the cost of the work. So grants are really good. Windows and doors was probably the big headline. That's now available individually, so you can claim the windows and doors on their own. Again, there is an asterisk for this as well. Your walls and your attic have to be at a certain level before they'll pay you out on the window and door grant. So it's not a case of just blindly apply for the grant, put in the windows, and you'll get the grant back. Before you can claim any grants from SEAI, they want a BER done, and on that BER, they'll want the attic and the wall U values will have to be either good or very good. So if you go ahead, do the windows, get your BER done, and the attic and the wall don't come back at good or very good on the advisory report, SEAI will not pay out on that grant. So there is a small bit of a health warning there. It is good news. It is great for getting more upgrades done, but there's just a word of warning there with it. They're all changes for the individual grants. For the one-stop shop in the CEG, which is kind of the group grants, if you like, all the same increases above as above have are put in place. So the heat pump max grant is 12,500 as well. One of the big changes was the removal of the max pre-BER. So previously, if your BER was too high, they wouldn't let you into a one-stop shop or a CEG. That kind of made sense because they wanted to incentivize people lower down the BER scale to bring their houses up to a B2 or a B1 or an A. The problem was a lot of people who were maybe a C2 then got solar, which brought them up to a B2, and then meant they couldn't now apply for the one-stop shop or the CEG to get their attic cavity and heat pump done. So it was ruling out some people that, again, the spirit of the grants were intended to help. So they've removed that max pre-BER. And when you're installing a heat pump, they've actually removed the requirement for the 100 kilowatt hour uplift. And we'll go through that in a bit more detail later on. But they've acknowledged basically that if you're installing a heat pump, your insulation level has to be at a certain level before you get the heat pump grant, and the heat pump is almost the final step in the journey. So you've done all you can. So they've removed some of the obstacles that could be put in place for that. So this is the list of the various grants for the various elements. You can see they're fixed grant amounts. So these are for detached houses. Semi-detached houses are slightly less, mid-terrace are slightly less again, and apartments are less again. But either way, they're all fixed grant amounts. So attic insulation is now €2,000, excuse me, for a detached house. That doesn't matter if your house is 400 square meters or 60 square meters. It's €2,000 is the max grant you can get. Again, one of the big changes is the introduction of the windows and doors that you can get individually. That wasn't the case. You still have some elements that you cannot get individually, that you can only get through the one-stop shop or the CEG. But since the introduction of windows and doors, these have been reduced greatly. But there is €11,350 theoretically extra that you could get by going down through the one-stop shop or the CEG. The eligibility criteria then that you need to hit is get to the B2. You must get that 100 kilowatt hour per meter squared per year uplift. That's what these numbers on the left-hand side of the scale are indicating. It's kilowatt hours per meter squared per year. And what they want is for that to be €100 less by the time you're finished than it was when it began. But they have removed that if you are installing a heat pump. So if you're installing a heat pump, you don't need to worry about that 100 kilowatt hour uplift. If you're not installing a heat pump, you do need to achieve it. I would say extremely difficult to achieve that 100 kilowatt hour uplift with just windows insulation, windows and insulation or ventilation upgrades. So you're really looking at either doing a heat pump and PV or PV with that. All of these are calculated prior to works commencing. So a lot of people think that what if I don't get there at the end? There's a software calculation that's done that provides evidence that this is where we've got to, and we're happy that we'll achieve this, provided we do these specific list of works and to this specification. So it's not a guessing game. It's not a case of we'll install and hope for the best. It's all calculated. Marie, questioning, for an apartment, if the end of the heated envelope is a door to a common hall, is that considered an external door for a grant? No, there is technically no. If it's a non-heated hallway or a non-heated space, you could make that argument, Marie, but in general, unfortunately, that doesn't fall under the external door grant. So, as well as achieving this uplift on the BER and the house achieving that standard, there is individual U values that need to be met. And again, what they need to do is to make sure that the element that they're giving the grant for is at a certain specification. So they don't want to give you €4,000 for installing windows and you install second-hand windows or windows with a very poor U value. So they've set specific U values that they need to hit. The windows need to be 1.4. That's a fairly standard double glazed unit. Doesn't have to be triple glazed, but it does need to be 1.4 or less. The lower the U value, the better. It can't be 1.41. So there is a very careful word of warning there. You don't want to change your windows and put them in at 1.42 and now you won't get the grant. If it's 1.39, you will get the grant. So each element has those specific U values that they need to hit. Your attic insulation there, for example, is 300 mil of fiberglass in the attic. Your floor insulation is 150 mil of PIR, or that solid floor insulation. There are certain cases where minimums might not be enough. So again, this comes back to the calculation that happens in the BER software to make sure that we get to that B2 or get to that 100 kilowatt hour uplift if we need it. We're not installing heat pump. Or there's a third element called the HLI, the heat loss indicator, that we might need to get it down to in order to get the heat pump grant. So there's a few calculations that need to be done in order to make sure that we comply. We don't want to be left in a scenario that we're finished all the works and something has slipped over and we're now putting all the grants at risk. So having those calculations done and verified before we start works is critical. So I'm going to give a case study for a CEG project and a case study for a one-stop shop project now, which the CEG project is where we think most of the vacant and derelict houses that we're coming across should be going into, and we'll explain that why. We'll give you a one-stop shop example just to show you that the one-stop shop is not a useless grant. It's an excellent tool that might be trying to be used in the wrong area. So there's two elements to this project. There is the original house and the extension. Obviously, the extension has to be built to new build regs. So you're technically not getting any grants for the extension. What you're getting the grants for is for upgrading the original house. It doesn't matter that you're doing the extension. You don't have to pretend that you're not doing the extension or anything like that. It's only that you're only getting grants for upgrading the elements of the existing part of the house. As an example, to, I suppose, make this point, there was a back door here on the original part of the house and the front door. So obviously they've upgraded the front door. This back door is no longer an external door because the extension has been added on. So the back door is now here. That's part of the new build. So they can't get a grant for this door because it's part of the new build, but they can get a grant for this door. So you're only getting grant aided for upgrading the elements of the original part of the house. Doesn't matter in 99% of cases, but again, an important thing to be aware of. It's not something you want to be depending on getting the grants for something, and then you find out that for some reason you didn't tick the right box. So we'll analyze this house beforehand, and this is the grants that we can guarantee. So when a project like this comes to us, we'll analyze it, we do the calculations, and we'll say this is the grant amounts you're getting, and Ashgrove will guarantee those provided you stick to the specification we provide. And this is the specification, so you can see floor insulation there. There's 76 meters squared of it to be done in the original part of the house. That needs to be done to a U value of 0.15, which is about 150 mil of floor insulation. Windows needed to be done to 1.4. They didn't need to be any better than that. You can, of course, go better than that. That's no problem. But you don't want to go worse. There are scenarios where people come across where, for some reason, they can't do something that they intended on doing. SEAI are open to those scenarios. What we have to make sure is that we come to it as early as possible and highlight it beforehand. So we have scenarios, I suppose, particularly with dry lining, where there's a certain thickness of dry lining needed on a wall. If that then it needs to be done on a stairwell and it limits the space of the stairwell, we will be allowed to put less insulation on that wall. However, we need to bring it to SEAI beforehand and say, this is the wall we're putting less insulation on. This is the reason why we're putting less insulation on it. Are you okay with that? They'll give us the nod and we can go ahead. What we don't want to happen is SEAI come out to inspect the house and go, okay, you didn't put the thickness of insulation that was required on that wall. And now we're saying, oh, well, we couldn't actually because the fire exit. They would say, you should have notified us beforehand. There's no point in coming up with excuses afterwards. We can all come up with excuses afterwards. So staying in communication is key. And that's, I suppose, what we're here to do, is to be that communication, ensure that everything is kept on track. The other scenario that we come across an awful lot is that somebody can't do something for some reason. We'll say, excuse me, we'd say they fall in love with windows that have a U value of 1.6 and they're dead set on getting those. As long as people come to us as early as possible, we can rerun the calculation with the 1.6 U value windows and say, okay, you're not getting the window grant, but you're actually still getting all the other grants. What could happen there is the windows slipping above the 1.6 could end up with you falling out of the rest of the grants for some reason. So we want to make sure that everything's above board, that everything is considered, and don't want to find stuff out afterwards, because it can get very awkward if somebody changes their spec halfway through the project, doesn't let us know, and then we're explaining the consequences of why they're not getting grants afterwards. So communication is a big thing there. So that's the specification we'll give to you. We're happy to talk through that with homeowners, architects, engineers, builders, all that sort of stuff to make sure they're comfortable with it. I finished building my own house a few years ago, and the amount of decisions you have to make when you're undertaking these types of projects is incredible. So the last thing we want is homeowners trying to communicate U values to builders and something getting lost in translation. So we're happy to have a conversation with yourself, your builder, your architect, whoever you want, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. In order to maximize the two grants, and I'm conscious of time here, but one of the big potential pitfalls here is that you essentially fill out the grants in the wrong order to get both the SEAI and the vacant property grant. As I said earlier, they don't want to grant aid you for the same thing twice, because whilst you might be spending 300,000 on your build or your extension and your upgrade, you could in theory profit from the windows element. So through the vacant grant, you can get up to 21,000 for windows and doors. Through the SEAI, you can get 5,600 for windows and doors. There is a scenario there where your windows cost you 22,000. You claim 21,000 through the vacant and derelict, and you claim 5,600 through the SEAI. You've now claimed 27,600 of taxpayers' money to pay for a 22,000 euro element. You are profiting from that element. I know the whole build has cost you way more, but for that element, you've gotten taxpayers' money to upgrade your windows, and it hasn't cost you that much. So we can't have people profiting from grants. It's not the right use of taxpayers' money. So the big thing is that we fill out the SEAI grants first, claim as much as we can through that, because that's more prescriptive. And after that, then we fill out the vacant house grant. There is a 1% of case where you're better off sacrificing the SEI grants in order to get the bigger grant. But in 99% of cases, there is enough other works happening that you can still claim the 70,000 through the vacant and derelict and maximise your SEI grants as well. So this is a scenario where they've ticked off all the SEI grants, gotten as much as they can, 38,250, and then gone through with the vacant house grant and got 70,000. If they theoretically did it the other way, they can still maximise the vacant grant, but when they went to do the SEI grants, they could get certain elements, but because they claimed the windows through the vacant grant, they couldn't get that, and because they maybe claimed the heat pump through the vacant grant, they couldn't get that element. So then they only get 21,750 euro grants. So they left 16,500 euro behind them. So this is correct order, I would say, for 99% of cases. There is 1%, as I said, where you're not utilising the full 70,000 or the max grant you've been approved for the vacant, in which case it might be the right thing to sacrifice some of the SEI grants. But in most cases, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you're maximising both of those. So before I go into case study for the one-stop shop, I'm just going to answer a few questions. This is the last slide, so I'll be maybe 5 minutes over. Just to clarify, if I want to get windows and door grant, do I still need to achieve the 100 energy uplift? Philip, no, you can get the window and door grant. You don't need to achieve the energy uplift. What you do need is for your attic and your windows, for your attic and your walls to be very good on the BER advisory report. So they have to be at a certain U value before you get it, but you do not have to get the 100 kilowatt hour uplift. Hopefully that answers that. Regarding window, door, attic and walls grant and the stages grant changes, i.e. get the home heat pump ready, can you apply for this grant with the wall insulation, cavity pumped, windows and doors and attic, and later when finances allow, reapply for the external wall insulation grant? Yes, so you can do it in stages. So you can get the one-stop shop to get your cavity wall, your attic and your heat pump done, and then in a year's time apply for the external wall insulation grant. They have allowed that. Follow up to my question, windows, doors, attic. Sorry, this is a follow up to that question, but cannot afford. Can you later apply for the grant for the RAP? Sorry, we didn't get to your question and you were just re-asking it, I think. You can. The one-stop, that sounds like a one-stop shop project, which there is benefits of going through the one-stop shop, doing it all at once, getting the value of the net of the grant, and there is a Hughes home energy upgrade loan scheme, which gives a very good interest rate, down as low as 3% in some cases. So you can separate out the works, but there is benefits of doing it all together. Obviously, if finances don't allow it, unfortunately, we're all restricted by that. But at least theoretically, it is allowed. Super. I think Connor's answering some of those there. So the one-stop shop case study, these are houses. You can see they're very different to the house that we looked at in the previous case study. These are houses that are being lived in the estate here in Mallow. They're 2-story, semi-detached, 103 meters squared. They were built in 2003. The BER was a C2. What the people actually rang us looking for was for a green mortgage. They wanted to get up to a B3. And they could do that by getting solar, which was what they were asking for. However, we did an analysis on the houses and we were able to put an alternative offering in front of them where they got the attic and cavity, the air-to-water heat pump and the PV panels done, and the cost was 8,100. So the solar at the time would have been in around 7,000, but they got all that work done then for 8,100. So at the time, the cost was 25,000 and the grants were 17,000. This was maybe 3 years ago. The costs have probably gone up a little bit. But so of the grants, so you probably end up in around the same place. They got from their C2 up to an A3. They were happy. They can now fund that project. They couldn't at the time, but since April last year or maybe the year before, there is a huge home energy upgrade loan scheme, which is a great loan scheme. It's government backed, so the banks can give a very low interest rate, and it allows for loans of up to 75,000 for doing home energy upgrades at that rate, and you can pay it back over anywhere between 2 and 10 years. So yeah, it's a very good offering and a real solution for people who want to remove that capital cost, and rather than taking it out of their own money, they can avail of this loan when they're getting SEAI grants. So that's another similar case study that got windows and doors on top of that, but I'm not going to go through that because we're stuck for time. We have more webinars coming up. This Friday, I think it's the 27th, we're doing Deep for One Stop Shop. We're going into the deep software here and seeing, okay, how do various houses work when we're applying for the one-stop shop, what will work for the windows and door grants, what do we need to look for, all that sort of stuff. In the 6th of March, we're doing a windows and doors grant upgrade. The grants, obviously, for windows and doors have been announced individually. There's still a lot of confusion out there around the eligibility criteria. So we'll hopefully be clearing that up in more detail on the 6th of March. 10th of March, we're doing domestic solar PV. 13th of March, we're doing advanced heat pump installations. We'll be going through some of the various scenarios for installing a heat pump and how it can work in more unique buildings. We've all heard a lot of probably bad press around heat pumps. The box itself is tested and certified to work in a certain way. A lot of the problems, unfortunately, we're seeing, particularly in Ireland, is lack of knowledge around the surrounding installation. So your radiators, your underfloor, all that sort of stuff. There's a bit of lack of understanding of what the heat pump likes and what it doesn't like. So we go through some of that. On the 13th of March, the 16th of March, then we have our live event. It's Vacant Derelict event in the Mullingar Park Hotel. It's on, that 16th is a Monday evening at 6:30. So we'll be going through that. You can register on our website. And then on the 20th of March, we've upgrade grants for businesses. So we'll be going through commercial grants that are available for doing up office blocks or doing up your business premises, and what you can get. We'll also be touching on GA clubs and charities and all that sort of stuff as well. Heat pump common mistakes. This is another heat pump webinar. There's the webinar calendar, which is available on our website. And that's it from me. I think Connor has answered a lot of the questions. Thanks, Connor. And thank you, everyone, for joining me and listening to me for an hour. Hopefully you got something from it. Hopefully it was useful. If you do have any more questions, feel free to contact us. We're happy to help wherever we can. Yeah, thanks very much and enjoy your evenings.